Grace and peace, Apostle Cheryl Richardson here with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. Today, we're going to be talking about when a batterer is highly skilled and well respected. When a batterer is highly skilled and well respected. Now, this is segment number 2. In our first segment, we discussed this as it pertains to law enforcement officers. We're going to take a look at some other professions on today. But before we get into our topic, I want you to take a few minutes, if you've not done so already, and look for the subscribe button down here. Click on that subscribe button and then make sure you click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we upload our weekly video. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to take care of that, and then I'll be right back with you. We'll get started in a few minutes. And we're back. Awesome. So thank you for taking the time to subscribe. And if you'd like to support us in other ways, then make sure that you share, comment, actively engage during this video, and it will be a tremendous help to us in getting the word out regarding raising domestic violence. We have a global mandate, a global mantle. We are committed to crying aloud and sparing not. Okay, so let's get into our topic for today. When a abuser occupies a position in society that kind of extends to them credibility. It's not individually, personally earned credibility. It's credibility that accompanies the office or the position. It places a domestic violence victim in a very precarious situation, and they have heightened challenges, and they're actually in heightened danger if their partner is an abuser. Now, in our previous segment, we focused on law enforcement officers. Today, we're going to take a look at a few other occupations that also have this credibility extended to them. It's innate in the office that they occupy in society. All right. And so it's a huge barrier for victims. So I'm going to give you some examples of some cases that have occurred here in recent years. Now, in one case, we're talking about a federal prosecutor from the state of California. This occurred back in March of 2020, and he's a federal prosecutor in California, and he killed himself and his wife, Tamara, and they'd only been married since November of the previous year. Now, I emphasize that because I'm finding in my research that often this is a factor, that it's a relatively new marriage, okay? He handled drug cases and gang crime cases for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he defended prisoners' lawsuits as well. So he occupied a position in society that was highly, highly respected. He had a lot of responsibility for ensuring the safety and the welfare of those who occupied California, right? He worked for the state's attorney's office. So in another instance, we have a former pastor, Timothy Crumity, who was convicted of the attempted murder of Kimberly Cherry and convicted of the murder of Kimberly Cherry's boyfriend. Now, Kimberly Cherry was the ex-partner of this pastor, okay? Since that time, he was also been charged with the murder of her missing daughter. And so all of this happened at about the same time. And miraculously, he went to the residence that Kimberly occupied with her boyfriend and jumped out from behind their door and shot the boyfriend in the head twice, kidnapped Kimberly, held on to her for a few hours while he tried to decide what to do with her, shot her in the head, and then shot her again in the temple and left her for dead. Okay, and so she was able to get away from him. He had locked her in the trunk. When he opened the trunk, she was able to get away from him with 2 bullets lodged in her head. She made a 911 call, and during the call, she was able to share that the gunman's name was Tim. So she was able to identify him, even though she'd been shot in the head twice, which is truly miraculous. And so then, fast forward a few months, 10, 11, 12 months or so, her daughter is missing, and you find out that her remains have been found, and now he's been charged with the abduction and the murder of her daughter. as well. And this was a former pastor. Now, when she met him, he was pastoring a church. Now, what's interesting about this case is this: he has a significant criminal history prior to this. Here's the caveat when you're talking about leaders who are abusive, and they're ministry leaders. There's this mindset of we've all been delivered from something. There's this mindset of not judging one another. There's this belief system that teaches us that no matter what you've done in the past, that if you've repented and if you were sincere, that God has forgiven you. He's thrown it into the sea of forgetfulness, not to be remembered ever again. But what happens is we abandon all common sense because the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And there are instances, of course, where someone can um, establish a real relationship with God, right? And be transformed and be changed in the renewing of their mind and all of that. But that means that these abhorrent behaviors don't continue. That's what it means. It means that they have stopped. That's what it means, okay? And so it's important to note that when you're talking about spiritual abuse in particular, that the scripture is often misappropriated. The patriarchal system in which religion is founded is forwarded to the demise of the victim, leaving the victim with little to no support whatsoever. And so I want you all to keep that in mind, okay? And then in another instance, you have Dallas pastor Eugene Keehee, who killed himself after starting a fire that claimed the lives of his wife and two of his teenage daughters. He was the father of four, and he pastored the Mount Zion Church of San Brand in Texas. Now, what's very chilling about this is that he killed himself after setting the house on fire. And so when the authorities arrived, the house was engulfed in flames, and he had shot himself. So he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. One of his teenage daughters was 14 or 15. The other one was like 17. He had two older children who were not at home at the time. And authorities had become concerned because he was posting cryptic messages on his Facebook page about how this was a difficult time in his life and just cryptic things that were concerning. And he posted most recently the same day that he killed his family. And so his daughters died from thermal injuries in the fire and smoke inhalation. Okay. And there are pictures of them on their social media page looking like one big happy family. Now, further research indicates that they were having some financial struggles, that the home that they lived in that he burned had been sold in a foreclosure auction just a few weeks prior. So he had some stressors going on in his life. And so oftentimes there are things that can occur that will trigger an already unstable situation. All right. What is my point? My point is a lot of times when we see these glowing reports on social media, family vacations, et cetera, it's all a ruse. It's all a ruse. And you cannot believe everything that you think you're seeing on social media. Okay. And so he was well respected. He was known as a community activist. No one had anything negative to say about him and his dealings. They felt that he was caring and that he was approachable, but he murdered his family and killed himself and burned the home. Okay. So that's indicative of some pre-existing instability. Okay. Now, Ezekiel Almodovar. This happened in February. So these are all things that have happened in the past several months. Okay. He was a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent. He killed his family, his wife, and two children, Ezekiel 16 and Gabriel 12. He murdered his entire family. Again, he occupied a position of authority, a border patrol agent. I mean, it's a lot of authority that he had, and a great impact that he would have on the life of others. My understanding is he worked at the Orlando airport. Okay. So I've given you these examples because I want you to see that positions that come with inferred credibility, that come with inferred respect, in which the individual person doesn't really have to earn it, that it accompanies the office is an incredibly dangerous position for a domestic violence victim to find themselves, okay? Incredibly dangerous because the psychological abuse that can occur, the concern that they won't be believed. In another instance, and we have a video concerning this particular case, a Cuyahoga County judge, a former judge, Lance Mason, brutally assaulted his wife, slamming her head into the console of their vehicle in front of his two children, one of which has special needs, literally broke her face in numerous places, literally broke her face, fractured the bones in her face. When it came up for trial, a whole contingent of ministry leaders showed up in court to support him, to talk about what an amazing person he is and what great things he'd done for the community, as though this could counter what he'd actually done to his wife in front of his children. Okay, and so they later divorced, and he was sentenced to an extended period of time in jail. He only spent a few months in jail. Part of the rationale was that his ex-wife Aisha did not want him to spend a long time in jail. It was going to incur a financial hardship. The other thing is, I'm pretty sure she was probably suffering from trauma bonding. Okay, it's you cannot go through that type of treatment. Number one, that's not the only thing he's ever done. Okay, and typically once the cycle of violence progresses to a place where it becomes physical, there's been an armada of verbal, emotional, financial abuse. There have been other forms of abuse, tons of gaslighting, threats, intimidation, you name it, has taken place. Generally, by the time it escalates to a place where they're actually putting their hands on you, okay? And so then trauma bonding occurs, which rewires the brain. And then there's this part of the victim that wants to protect, that doesn't want to create a financial hardship, that doesn't want to ruin the status or the position that the abuser has attained in life, and doesn't want to damage the credibility that the abuser enjoys because of the profession that they serve in. Okay. And they may very well be excellent, outstanding at what they do, but behind closed doors, the head spins around and they start spitting out green stuff. Okay. So that was one of the issues with that. So he didn't spend very much time in jail. He had this whole contingency of of politicians and ministry leaders who came to his aid and who spoke about how amazing he was and how this was out of character for him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I cannot imagine how she must have felt. I cannot imagine. But you fast forward a little while and you learn that during a time when he was supposed to be exchanging the children with her for visitation, he murdered her. Again, with the children present, he murdered her this time. And so since then, he's been sentenced to life in prison with a chance of parole after 25 years. Okay. But he was a judge. He passed sentence on other people. He oversaw the court proceedings that impacted the lives of others who've been accused of a crime. And here he is treating his wife this way and pretty much getting a pass for it. Okay. And so a victim of domestic violence who is dealing with a perpetrator who is well trained, well skilled, right? Knows their way around a courtroom, knows the prosecutor, knows the judge, is the judge, is a community activist, is a ministry leader, feeds the homeless, mows the grass for little old ladies. For them to try to hold them accountable for how they've been treated is an incredibly hard thing. It's an incredibly hard thing. Because one of the first things that they get as a response is, oh no, they could not have done that. There's no way they would have done that. What did you do? What did you do to provoke that? Okay, and so the purpose of this segment is just to bring to your attention how much more difficult it is, how much more difficult it is for a victim to get help when the abuser, okay, whether the victim is male or female, is well trained and highly respected. Each one of these professions that I've mentioned to you, a ministry leader, an attorney, a border patrol agent, a prosecutor, it could be a doctor, it could be a nurse. There was a surgeon, a well-renowned surgeon in Canada a couple of years ago who murdered his wife, put her body in a suitcase, then got cleaned up and went to work and performed surgeries that day, just as if nothing had happened. Okay. And it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. So I want to share some statistics with you before we go. According to the Centers for Disease Control National Violent Death Reporting System, of 408 homicide suicide cases, okay, they looked at 408 cases, 91% of the perpetrators are men. Now, we know that most of the reported cases in domestic violence in general are perpetrated by men, the reported cases. We can only talk about those that are reported, right? So the majority of those that are reported are by women who say that men have done it anyway. And so 91% of the perpetrators are men in murder suicide cases. 88% used a gun. And so this speaks to the fact that, and we've raised this in other videos, we have videos on this channel that talk about domestic violence and its relationship to gun violence. When a firearm is present in a home, it increases the likelihood that a homicide will occur by 500%. 500%. Almost guaranteed that it's going to occur, okay? Certainly, if the weapon has been brandished, if it's been mentioned in a veiled kind of way, if it's been threatened, if it's been blatantly stated, the presence of a firearm is a tremendous red flag, and it's an indicator of heightened danger. Okay. Now, in 408 cases that have been viewed of homicides, murder suicides, 70% had previous intimate partner violence. 70% had intimate partner violence issues in other relationships. Okay. And so it's important to remember that, particularly for those who are involved with ministry leaders or people who hold a high position in a house of worship. It doesn't have to be the pastor, it could be the minister of music, it could be the deacon, it could be the Sunday school teacher, it could be the church mother. Okay. So anyone can be a victim and anyone can be an abuser. But understand that where are you most likely to find someone who has a history that is overlooked by the masses? It's within a house of worship. It's within a house of worship, okay? Only 25% of these cases had appeared in prior arrest records. And so they were able to confirm that these situations had existed previously by talking to family members and friends of the victims, okay? But only 25% appeared actually substantiated in arrest records, which means that oftentimes it doesn't go that far. A charge isn't made, an arrest is not made, a trial is not scheduled, a conviction is not won, okay? Because most of the time it's not even reported, okay? So let's look at some risk factors. Risk factors. Number one, access to a gun. As I said before, if a gun is present, if a firearm is present, there's a 500% increase in the likelihood that a homicide will occur. It's just a matter of time, okay? Number two, threats with a weapon. So there's having a weapon, which if you're a law enforcement officer or if your partner is abusive and is a law enforcement officer, then there's 99% of the time a service weapon is present in the home. All right. So there's a weapon present. So that's a heightened state of danger right off the top. Number three, a stepchild in the home. So a stepchild being in the home and an attempt to blend this family and all of the dynamics around that seems to be a risk factor. Okay. Because what it means is there's a past. This child, who may not be the abuser's child, has another parent out there somewhere. And all of the dynamics that accompany that, whatever that looks like, whatever that relationship looks like, however the core relationship is impacted, it appears, based on research, that the presence of a stepchild in the home is also a risk factor. Why am I mentioning this? This is important to consider if you're involved with someone who occupies an office of where stature is attributed to them just based on the office itself. And if there's a stepchild involved, that it's a risk factor for other issues to occur. Okay. Estrangement or separation. We know that the first 30 to 90 days upon leaving an abusive situation, that the victim is in a heightened state of danger. Okay. And so anytime that they've mentioned, well, I'm going to leave you, they are up at the ante and putting themselves in danger. But 30 to 90 days out, it's been established, it's incredibly dangerous. And I would take it a step further and say that if, for example, there is an arrest and this person is released, the 30 to 90 days for them begins then. Also, let's say they move on, they find new supply, they get involved in a new relationship, and then it doesn't go well, or they get fired from their job. That whole 30 to 90-day window starts all over again, because often they blame the victim for this chain of events in their life, okay? And so it's important for you to keep that in mind. So we've talked about access to a gun. We've talked about threats with a weapon. We've talked about a stepchild being present in the home. And we've talked about estrangement. And another one would be unemployment that accompanies a history of previous domestic violence. So when unemployment is coupled with previous acts of violence, that is a huge red flag. All right. And so we hope that this has been helpful to you. We want victims who are partners with someone in a position of authority, who are, granted this privilege of respect and credibility because of the office that they hold, because of the job that they do, because of the face that they present to society on the outside, that these things are getting increased focus and attention. And so don't be discouraged. And we would encourage you to reach out for help. Reach out for help. Continue to reach out until someone hears you. You can call the Domestic Violence Hotline, the national line here in the United States. You can call domesticshelters.org. You can check out their websites. You can look at our blog at www.judasroar.com. We have this YouTube channel here, and you can check out the many, many videos we have on the different aspects of domestic violence. Also, we moderate a faith-based private group called Dominion Over Domestic Violence, and we vet very carefully who's allowed to come in. The Lord has instructed us to keep it small, and so that's what we have done. And to better ensure the safety and the privacy of those who are members of the group. We welcome professionals who want to lend support. We welcome professionals who start off wanting to lend support and realize that they too need support. That's okay too. All right. We are committed to speaking the truth in love, but speak the truth we will. All right. We're not going to compare bruises. We're not going to try to decide what abuser was worse than the other abuser. My injuries were worse than your injuries, and that's what we're about. We're about healing and growing and helping a survivor to thrive and helping them to understand that they have value and that they are important and that they do not have to be defined by the sum total of their abusive experiences. Okay? I am Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. We thank you for hanging out with us on today, and we want you to come back and check us out some more. All right? Blessings to you.